Bonsoir et merci pour votre présence. Je m'appelle Mathieu Buch, je suis pasteur de l'Union des Églises protestantes d'Alsace et de Lorraine, basé à Strasbourg, et je suis directeur également de l'Action Chrétienne en Orient. Alors j'aimerais remercier la paroisse de l'Oratoire du Louvre pour son accueil et puis le journal Réforme pour notre collaboration pour cette soirée. Regard croisé sur le Moyen-Orient. Quelques mots d'introduction sur l'Action Chrétienne en Orient, l'ACO. Donc l'ACO est une association missionnaire qui est née il y a 100 ans, en 1922. Nous sommes en plein dans les festivités, célébrations de notre centenaire. Cette association a été créée par le pasteur Paul Béron, un pasteur alsacien qui a été témoin du génocide des Arméniens en 1915. À cette époque, il était de nationalité allemande. Il a eu un rôle, on va dire, d'aumônier sur le front oriental, dans l'Empire ottoman, qui était allié des Allemands, contre les Anglais, les Russes, les Français. Et à Alep, en Syrie, il a vu les rescapés et il a vu les gens qui mouraient, les Arméniens rescapés, réfugiés du génocide. Il est ensuite rentré en Alsace, il est devenu français, voilà, le retour de l'Alsace à la France en 1918. Et il avait donc cette vocation d'être missionnaire et il a continué de travailler avec une mission allemande qu'il a à nouveau envoyée en 1922 au printemps à Alep en Syrie pour voir s'il était nécessaire de faire quelque chose pour les rescapés arméniens réfugiés à Alep. Il a dit oui, mais il faut une organisation française puisque maintenant la Syrie comme le Liban sont sous mandat français. Et donc l'ACO a été créée à ce moment-là en décembre 1922 et a commencé donc comme une association surtout d'entraide, de secours, sur plein de niveaux sociaux, éducatifs, humanitaires, auprès de cette population. Et puis, au fur et à mesure, l'œuvre s'est étendue, non seulement en Syrie, non seulement avec les Arméniens, mais aussi avec les chrétiens de langue arabe, au Liban, en Iran. Et aujourd'hui, on a une organisation qui s'appelle l'ACO Fellowship. Nous sommes 6 partenaires, 3 partenaires missionnaires européens, donc l'ACO France qui est à l'origine, RZB ou DZB qui est une association missionnaire réformée hollandaise, DM, une association missionnaire suisse de Suisse romande avec le comité ACO suisse, et les 3 autres partenaires sont des églises protestantes orientales, donc le synode arabe, ce qu'on appelle le synode arabe en manière courte, c'est-à-dire les chrétiens presbytériens de langue arabe qui sont présents au Liban et en Syrie, et puis l'Union des églises évangéliques arméniennes du Proche Orient, qui sont aussi présents au Liban et en Syrie, donc des chrétiens protestants de culture, de langue arménienne, et puis le synode d'Iran, qui réunit des chrétiens de différentes cultures, là aussi, qui vivent en Iran. Alors, il y a aussi des Arméniens, voilà, des Arméniens iraniens, il y a des Assyriens, il y a aussi des personnes qui simplement sont locuteurs du farsi, le persan. Et donc tous ensemble, on forme une communauté où on se rencontre sur un pied d'égalité, on a des projets en commun, on partage nos joies, nos peines, on prie ensemble, on se rencontre. Et actuellement, pour le centenaire, il y a une délégation de 35 personnes qui s'est retrouvée d'abord à Strasbourg la semaine dernière, puis maintenant à Paris. 35 personnes qui viennent donc du Liban, de Syrie, d'Iran, des Pays-Bas, de Suisse, aussi des États-Unis et d'Allemagne où il y a des frères et des sœurs qui sont exilés, qui sont originaires de l'Iran. Alors voilà, pour dire les choses de manière générale, si vous voulez en savoir plus sur l'ACO, tous les projets, on a un très beau site internet. Vous tapez Action Chrétienne en Orient sur un moteur de recherche et vous pouvez découvrir tout ce qu'on fait. On a besoin de soutien. On a un soutien très fort des églises protestantes d'Alsace, mais l'Église protestante unie de France est devenue membre également. Donc voilà, on est de plus en plus connus. Et puis on a des relations très proches aussi avec l'Union des Églises évangéliques arméniennes de France, puisque cette église, cette union d'églises qui est membre de l'AFPF et aussi du CNEF, il me semble, a été aidée par l'ACO à ses origines, en 1923, lorsque des réfugiés arméniens arrivaient aussi en France, à Marseille notamment, puis dans la vallée du Rhône, à Lyon, puis à Paris, pour aider pour que leur église puisse exister. Et donc voilà, on a vraiment un réseau assez extraordinaire, avec une histoire maintenant très belle et centenaire. Mais je vais laisser la parole à nos invités et à Claire Bernole, journaliste de Réforme, pour introduire cette soirée. Simplement vous dire que nos invités eh bien, sont Sébouh Terzian. Sébouh Terzian est pasteur, il dirait prédicateur, de l'Union des Églises évangéliques arméniennes du Proche Orient. Il vit et travaille à Beyrouth, au Liban. Il est directeur d'une institution pour personnes âgées qui s'appelle le CAAL. Il est également très investi dans le comité d'action sociale de son église, qui fait un travail extraordinaire dans le quartier de Bourg-Jamoud. Ceux qui connaissent un petit peu le Liban, Bourg-Jamoud, c'est la localité où, traditionnellement où il y avait également plein de réfugiés arméniens qui sont venus après le génocide s'établir dans la banlieue de Beyrouth. Et il y a toujours aujourd'hui dans ce quartier très défavorisé un énorme travail à faire au niveau social, avec des réfugiés syriens aussi, avec des gens pauvres, et encore plus pauvres avec la situation au Liban. Et notre deuxième invité, c'est le pasteur Salam Hanna, qui est donc de l'église de langue arabe, le synode arabe. Il est pasteur en Syrie, à Latakié, qui se trouve sur la côte méditerranéenne, donc à l'ouest de la Syrie. Et Salam a aussi été responsable, ou encore responsable, du programme d'entraide de son église pour la Syrie, qui est dans sa 11e année de guerre. Voilà pour cette petite introduction. Merci à vous.
Bonsoir et merci à tous d'être là pour cette table ronde. Je remercie chaleureusement l'Oratoire du Louvre qui nous accueille gracieusement ce soir. Nous allons commencer avec un temps d'échange avec mes deux invités, puis la parole vous sera donnée dans un deuxième temps. Donc si vous avez des questions, surtout, gardez-les bien présentes à l'esprit. Il y aura un moment où vous pourrez les poser à nos deux invités. Regard croisé sur les crises du Proche Orient, c'est le thème qui a été choisi pour cette soirée, un thème multifacette, on pourrait l'aborder de bien des manières. Alors avec nos deux invités, vous l'aurez compris, on va se concentrer sur le Liban et la Syrie, ce qui n'est déjà pas mal, il y a à dire. Alors avant de leur donner la parole, je voudrais quand même rappeler un peu la situation de ces deux pays de façon très brève et très résumée. En Syrie, d'abord, la vague des printemps arabes a atteint le pays en mars 2011. Dans le sud du pays, à Dera, une partie du peuple s'est soulevée contre Bachar el-Assad, une famille qui est d'ailleurs au pouvoir depuis 1970. Alors les manifestations ont été durement réprimées, on l'a vu, ça a été rapporté dans nos médias. En quelques mois, 5000 Syriens ont été tués. Et pour résumer, ensuite, l'armée syrienne libre, qui était la force d'opposition jusqu'alors dominante, a cédé le terrain à l'organisation État islamique. Et en 2014, Daesh a proclamé le califat en prenant le contrôle d'un tiers de la Syrie et de l'Irak. Des millions de Syriens ont fui le pays et après plus de 10 ans de guerre civile, maintenant le bilan s'est alourdi. Au moins 400 000 personnes sont mortes et 4 millions de personnes ont quitté le pays. Ce sont les derniers chiffres que j'ai réussi à trouver. Je pense qu'ils mériteraient d'être actualisés, mais voilà, j'ai fait avec les informations que je pouvais vérifier autant que faire se peut depuis ici. Et donc Bachar el-Assad est toujours au pouvoir. Voilà ce qui me semblait important de rappeler avant d'aller plus loin et de discuter de la Syrie. Au Liban, de l'autre côté, en 2019, donc, il faut rappeler qu'une révolte sociale a largement gagné le pays à la suite de l'annonce de nouveaux impôts, notamment concernant la taxation du prix de l'essence, mais aussi le tabac, les appels via les applications WhatsApp, par exemple. En août 2020, une explosion de grande ampleur dans le port de Beyrouth a fait 215 morts, 6 000 blessés, plus de 30 000 personnes sans abri, ce qui est venu ajouter à la crise que traverse le pays. Quelques jours après cette explosion, des dizaines de milliers de manifestants se sont rassemblés et ont tenté de prendre le contrôle de lieux de pouvoir dans la capitale, dans les banques, À ce jour, ce qu'on peut dire, c'est que 80% de la population au Liban vit désormais sous le seuil de pauvreté tel que défini par l'ONU. Alors à ce jour, la situation, on peut dire qu'elle a empiré puisqu'avec la guerre en Ukraine, il y a des soucis de ravitaillement. Le Liban importe 80% de son blé depuis l'Ukraine. L'insécurité alimentaire s'est généralisée. Et cette crise économique, on peut dire qu'elle touche toutes les classes sociales à travers une dévaluation de la lire libanaise, une dévaluation de la monnaie locale. Et enfin, les élections qui ont eu lieu ce printemps, au printemps 2022, engager quelques espoirs et néanmoins ne semble pas avoir débouché sur davantage de stabilité. Mais bon, voilà, Sébouh Terzian sera là pour témoigner, parler. Et d'ailleurs, voilà, moi j'ai fait un résumé aussi factuel que possible en tant que journaliste française de la situation dans ces deux pays. Mais j'aurais aimé commencer en donnant la parole à l'un et à l'autre pour qu'ils nous décrivent eux-mêmes, à hauteur d'homme, la situation telle qu'ils la vivent, telle qu'ils la traversent, à hauteur d'homme, et j'ai envie de dire aussi à hauteur de pasteur. Quel est votre regard de pasteur et comment décririez-vous la situation peut-être telle qu'elle est en Syrie? D'abord, je peux vous donner la parole en premier, Salam.
First of all, I would like to thank you all for coming here and for the church who received us and for Claire for the introduction she gave. And we are happy to be in France, the country of liberty, equality, and fraternity. I will not repeat what Claire said. I will talk about the current situation. Now we are suffering of various major challenges. On the energy level, we have a shortage of energy in gas, in gasoline, in diesel, in fuel for electricity. For example, I live in Latakia on the Mediterranean coast, which is an area that was not so much affected by the Syrian war. I'm talking about fighting. It was not so much affected by fighting. But in Latakia, we only have 2 hours of electricity out of 24 hours per day. So we have to function all our tasks in these 2 hours, to warm, to cool, to use the refrigerator, to watch TV, etc. Of course, people started to find other alternatives, like generators, private generators, or sharing in big generators through taking few amperes with a certain amount per week or per month, or using batteries, and now some are going to the solar panels. So this is an example of what's going on for the energy, as I'm talking about electricity. As for gasoline or diesel or fuel or gas, for example, you can only fill your car with a maximum of 50 liters per month. That's the total amount allowed for every person, and each liter is $1. which is too expensive for the Syrians. I'll move from the energy level to economic level. Syrian currency depreciated from 50 Syrian pound per dollar before 2011 to 4,800 Syrian pound now. So it's almost 98 times. This devaluation of the currency led to a severe poverty. For example, a governmental employee is waged a monthly salary of $25. Meanwhile, the minimum or the poverty line, according to United Nations, is $2 per day, which is $60 per month per person. So we are talking about less than a third of the minimum wage allowed or put by the United Nations standards. Beside that, there is an escalation of prices. Everything is so much expensive for Syrian. So this has led people to look for only basic items and go for a low quality of food. Some cannot afford with $25 or $30 per month for their monthly food. Some cannot provide for fuel, for gasoline, for diesel, for electricity, for clothes, for medication. And they live in an economic misery. After talking about energy and economy, I'll move to the psychological situation. People are quite traumatized, depressed, because they don't feel there's an end to this. And that's why many has left and still living and want to leave the country because they don't feel there's a horizon in front of them for the future. Especially young people, after they study and finish their schools or university, they say, am I going to work with $25, $30 per month? That's not enough even for renting a room. And that's why, like all desperate countries around the world, we hear about people immigrating to Europe through the Mediterranean Sea or through Turkey, Greece, in a humanitarian smuggling, and because they are depressed. I'll add to what Claire said about refugees, 4 million people, that's right, maybe more, now 5 million. But IDP or internally displaced people, we have around 6 million who left their homes and they cannot go back because their homes are totally or partially destroyed or demolished. As for the Christians, they are a major component of the community, although they are little in number, but they are big in presence and influence. The churches were there as a humanitarian agency to help people, Christians and non-Christians alike, but also Christians immigrated like other people in the country, and they feel that where's the solution? How could this be solved? Part of the problem is the war. The other part is the sanctions against Syria, because the international community, with exception of Russia and China, they have problem with the Syrian regime. So that's why they put sanctions on Syria. And these sanctions actually are not only affecting the ruling government, but they are affecting the people. And the people are suffering as part of these sanctions. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sébouh Terzian. I'm a licensed preacher, currently, as Reverend Matthew introduced. I'm the director of an elderly home called Kahal. Actually, my colleague Salam, whatever he said, I will compliment because we face the same issues and I don't want to lose time on the details he talked about. I will add few things. Now, politically speaking, Lebanon, the problem in Lebanon has started since 1975 with the so-called civil war. And during different decades or years, Lebanon had some secure and peaceful years, and other times we had internal struggles. So it fluctuated. So at any moment, people felt safe, then the next day they would encounter some kind of a struggle or fights or wars. Usually Lebanon has been affected because of its geographical position, affected by both internal struggles and external struggles. Internal struggles are due because of denominational or so-called religious issues sometimes, then also because of political issues. And because of the geopolitical situation around us, so every time something happens outside our country, which is very near to us, Lebanon is affected too. A while ago, Reverend Salam talked about refugees, internal refugees. We have, for example, in Lebanon around officially 1 million Syrian refugees, but some NGOs say it's more, maybe 1.5 million refugees. Now, of course, as any human being would accept refugees, like Armenians were refugees long time ago, but now as Armenians we are very much integrated in the country as Lebanese. However, refugees, when they come and live in a very economically affected country, crisis, then refugees which the Lebanese accepted warm-heartedly, nowadays they feel that the refugees are a burden on them because they use the resources of the country, like water and electricity. Some of them are helped by the United Nations by being paid monthly an amount so that the refugee and its family can survive. And this amount sometimes amounts to more than a Lebanese gets as a salary. So you can see the struggle between the Lebanese families now who are being affected by the economic crisis and see that their counterparts, their brothers and sisters, are receiving some kind of a help without work, much more than their own salary. So these are internal issues in Lebanon. Now I will go to more details, just to give you an example of salary issues. Before the economic crisis, before 2019, October 2019, the minimum wage salary of an employee was, let's say, 500 euros. Now it's 50 euros. So you can notice the inflation and the discrepancy. Above that, the subsidy that the government paid for different items in the country, because medicine, diesel oil or fuel, electricity, food items like wheat, etc., important, basic, were subsidized by the government. Now, the government, how did it subsidize? We actually don't know. But that's part of the problem, because the government was subsidizing these items from indirect taxes of the civilians. But at the end, people were benefiting by having low prices of fuel, medicines subsidized, wheat and bread subsidized. Now, because of the inflation, because of the issues, the government is almost bankrupt. And so they removed the subsidies on occasionally, let's say, in a year's time, they removed the subsidy, for example, on certain medicines and the diesel. This created, of course, high prices of goods and everything. So the wages are now less, but the prices of everything is more. I want to stress today also on the problem of hospitalization and medicine. The government had its own, let's say, public hospitals, which most of them accepted patients, and by minimal payment, they would treat the patient for any surgery or operation. Nowadays, the public hospitals are acting like private ones. They won't, even if it's an emergency case, they want the patient or the family to pay a down payment, for example, around 1,000 euros, in order to admit them into the hospital. So literally and actually, an urgent case can die in front of the doors of the hospital, which will not be opened unless a deposit of 1,000 euro or the equivalent in Lebanese is paid. This is one issue, and of course, if the patient gets in, this is a down payment and not the final bill. We as Social Action Committee are receiving unimaginable costs of hospitalization. So imagine if someone's salary is 50 euro, then the whole year he's getting 600 euro. And if the case is a very acute one, let's say it's a cancer case, a brain tumor, needs hospitalization, that will cost around 9,000 or 10,000 euros, let's say, because today the rate is almost the same. So how can this person or the whole family, even if 4 of them in the family are working, cannot meet the expense? Medicine is another issue. First, because of the prices, it's increasing and getting more expensive, and because we are lacking medicine now. We have several patients we know who need chemotherapy after the surgeries, and we don't have the chemotherapy medicine. So either the family is trying to bring them from another country, or trying to find ways with the pharmaceutical companies so that they can import them with high prices, of course. So during wars and crises, you can feel people being affected, and at the same time others are benefiting from the situation and making money. Unfortunately, this is the case in every crisis or wartime. Some people benefit and some other make money, and others get their health or even their life endangered. In all this situation, however, as churches and as Christian organizations, we're trying to support the family with the help of our brothers and sisters, whom some of them are here, like the ACO Fellowship and others. So we're trying to benefit from their help so that we can at least help them in some of their expenses.
Mais Sébouh ne doit pas répondre d'avance à ma prochaine question. Parce que bien sûr, la situation de crise que vous avez décrite avec les besoins qui sont exprimés dans de telles situations me pousse à vous poser cette question. Quel est le rôle des églises? Qu'est-ce que les églises peuvent faire dans un tel contexte? Quels sont leurs moyens d'action, leurs leviers d'action? Sébouh en premier et ensuite la parole sera à Salam.
Okay, since I have started answering the question, I'll continue. So as I was saying, the first few months of the crisis, people were in a shock. What was called at that time middle class of the country, of the families, felt their money is being confiscated in the banks. So if someone had money in the bank refused to give them because the bank themselves said we are bankrupt, we don't have, because we have lended it, the money, gave it to the central bank, who in turn was supporting the government to pay the public sector and other things. This is not during the past few years, this has been the trend for a decade and more. So you have money in the bank, you cannot use it, you have to beg for your money, and the bank would say, okay, if you have $100,000 in the bank, for example, I can give you only $200 per month. And not in dollars sometimes, but with the rate they decide of how much to pay. So the middle class, suddenly we felt in few months' time, in a year and a half time, the middle class disappeared, and those middle class people now felt that they need help. In the past, these middle class people were gaining some kind of a money, living normal lives, meeting with their basic needs, and they were the helpers of others. They were the contributors to the churches and to the poor. Now they felt they are poor. So you can imagine these families, they refused to go and ask for help at the beginning, but later on, the expense on a family was so much, and sometimes with the encouragement of the Christian workers or the pastors or the leaders of the churches, we felt their pain and we tried to help them indirectly or asking them, if you need help, you know we're here, we're present, we have our social action office, we have the church, so if you need anything, please contact us. You know, slowly, so that they don't feel ashamed to come. And now we have overcome that stage. Now everyone that need help is going for an NGO, or in our case, the church or the social work office of the church. Apparently, after the blast in Lebanon, lots of NGOs arrived to help for the Lebanese people and help them. Now this was good. Of course, any help is good for the people. However, as a church organization, we felt that there was lack of coordination of this help. Now some NGOs came and worked with traditional, let's say, social centers. So they were keen enough not to work directly because they knew that these traditional NGOs know the people, know the situation better. But others came and just started working, and this created some kind of a chaos. So you can imagine now there are people benefiting, double dipping, or getting help from 3 or 4 different organizations, and other families are not receiving anything. Because of the lack of coordination, this happens. Now, as a community, as a church community or Armenian, let's say, social institutions, our social workers try to overcome this problem by contacting each other. So our social workers, our ladies, usually whenever someone new comes for help, we just contact the social centers around that's working in the neighborhood to see if they have benefited and how much, so that we complement and not double dip. So we're very keen, because we are called to be good stewards at the end. This is a biblical instruction. We don't want to waste money, but to give the money to the place where it is needed. So pastors, Christian workers are doing this in support and prayers by outside partners, as I was saying, the fellowship of ACO and its members, member mission organizations, other missionaries and mission workers. They are working through our churches, and this is the same for the Synod in Lebanon. We are working with these, let's say, external brothers and sisters for the community. Now, this is very important, because even church leadership, Christian leaders, we find it very important that we feel brothers and sisters from outside Lebanon visiting us, praying with us, seeing in their own eyes the situation, and going back and explaining this to their communities, to their churches. This fellowship with each other is creating some kind of a hope, both for the leader, Christian leaders, the churches, and of course the people. At the end, people need hope to stay somewhere. Otherwise, as Reverend Salam said, lots of young people are traveling away if they can, because of economic crisis and reasons. One more thing. Lebanon, before the crisis, the statistics would say that in 2030, one third of the population would be elderly. This was before the crisis. Now, with the immigration of the young people from the country, we presume in 2030, half of the people will be elderly, because they will leave their parents behind, they will go out, and soon their parents will become the elderly who would need assistance for living.
Salam, que pouvez-vous nous dire de la marge de manœuvre des églises en Syrie, notamment concernant l'action sociale?
The church during the crisis, the 10 years, or now more than 10 years crisis, was there from the very beginning. All churches, Protestants, Catholics, Orthodox, Armenians, all give a hand of help to all people who suffered from the war and the humanitarian crisis till now. Not only the churches, even some church-based organizations like Compassion Protestant Society, Department of Ecumenical Relations and Development for the Greek Orthodox, Caritas for the Catholics, the Jesuits, all the church-based organizations stood beside the churches and the people to help them. Also, many NGOs helped the people. Many NGOs, international non-profit organizations, also stood beside the people. So you have different organizations or entities all trying to work, whether individually or together, in order to stand beside the people. What did the church do? The church walked with the people in their journey of suffering and displacement. They gave them spiritual comfort, spiritual hope, financial assistance, food, medicine, psychological support. They mourned with them, they cried with them. I'm talking about a community that was helping the community. This was only to happen because we have partners outside Syria, like ACO, like all the members of ACO, like the Presbyterians and Lutherans in United States, in Germany, in Switzerland, in France, everywhere. They were the channels and the hand of God to stand behind us and support us in order to continue our journey as we are helping the people inside. Reverend Sébouh talked about visits, and those visits were very important because they tell that we are the partners. They tell that we are with you in your suffering, and we are here to help as much as we can, and this was much appreciated.
Dans un contexte aussi sensible, un contexte de crise, un contexte politiquement instable, quelles sont les relations que les églises peuvent entretenir avec l'État? Comment on fait dans des cas comme cela? Sébouh?
I can talk about Lebanon. Churches in Lebanon are kind of represented in the government, through the parliament, through their, let's say, denominational members. For example, the evangelical church is usually represented by a deputy in the parliament. So out of the 128 deputies in the parliament, we have one evangelical. Usually the parliament is 50% Christians, 50% Muslims. So you can imagine the 50% of the Christian deputies belonging to a denomination, which does not necessarily mean they are Christians in faith, but in Lebanon you have to belong to a denomination, so they are Christians in identity. And of course, when you become a deputy, the church or the deputy is regarded as part of a certain church, is always collaborating with its own church. Now, as churches usually, and evangelical churches especially, we are there to sound the alarm if there is any injustice. So the churches do their duty towards issues, matters which they feel is against our Christian belief or living or the way people are treated and so on. Not every time the state listens to what the churches are saying. However, church and state in Lebanon or denominations and state in Lebanon are closely bound with each other. In our case, like I said, evangelical churches, we try our best in matters especially that need attention in social justice and whatever. Whatever there is a gap by the government, we try to fill them by ourselves. Now, this is in a sense good, because if there are no support, church or church-related support to these people, and with the absence of the government in such matters, then the people will feel neglected and hopeless. For example, as we know in other countries, European or in the States, people get pension at the end of their retirement. In the Lebanese case, people get an indemnity which was not enough for their living in their later life after retirement already before the crisis, and now it's almost nothing because of the inflation and the dollar rate. So you can imagine someone who is retired now, he should have relied on the state to be taken care of, at least health-wise minimum. Now that's an absent thing, so the church or the church-related organization is trying to fill in. This is on the social level, and as I said, on certain political or justice issues, the churches are always there to sound the alarm and to make statements. Sometimes it works, sometimes the state has its own agenda and cannot be implemented.
Well, the churches in Syria were, to a certain extent, most of the churches, maybe all, were pacifists. They didn't interfere in the violence or the war that was going on. Only a few cases where Christians had to protect themselves in certain villages because they had attacks from ISIS or other radical Islamic militia and forces. But the churches in general, they are very much respected by all, even by the state itself and by the government, and they are given all the facilities to do their worship services, to do their social work, to do their humanitarian assistance, and this is something maybe not many people know, that Christians are well respected by the government and by the state because they are with stability and peace for the country.
Je voudrais poser une dernière question à nos intervenants. Ensuite, la parole sera à vous. Donc, si vous souhaitez intervenir aussi, vous pourrez le faire juste après. Préparez vos questions. Sébouh, Salam, j'aimerais vous demander une chose. Nous sommes ensemble ce soir et qu'est-ce que vous attendez des chrétiens occidentaux? Qu'est-ce que vous attendez de la France en particulier, puisque nous sommes là ensemble? Salam, je vous donne la parole.
We are brothers and sisters in humanity, in faith, and in history. Christianity started from the Middle East, and Paul walked in the streets of Damascus when he met Ananias, and some people visited that area. And we feel that we are very close to our sisters and brothers who live in the West and even all over the world, because we share the same faith, the same values. What we expect is that to understand the situation of the Middle East in reality, not only as it is presented sometimes by the biased medias, but by what's really going on and how these countries can be helped in different ways, and how to help the church and the Christians to continue their journey, their witness, their testimony, their faith in this troubled area, whether through raising awareness in some of the governments of the West, whether in giving assistance, whether in visiting, whether in supporting in different ways. So we stand together in facing all the troubles. And when something happens in Europe, for example, a tragedy like what happened to Notre Dame Church, we felt very sorry and very sad for that. Sometimes some incidents of violence happen here and there in France or in Germany or in United States. We really stand with our sisters and brothers, and we know that they have stood with us at the times of suffering and at times. So what we expect is more understanding and more, not only financial support here and there, but really raising the awareness about what is the solution and the help that they can offer for a country to stand by itself and face all the troubles it faces.
We need prayers. We really need prayers, and we need to pray for each other. As Christians in the Orient or in the West, we know the church is struggling also in the West. We have been having fellowship and feeling the struggles of the churches, let's say here in Europe, different kind of struggles. In our part of the world, the Christians are getting more and more to become minorities. As Christians in the East, we are not afraid of becoming minorities. On the contrary, we feel, although we are a minority, we're still serving God, our Lord, with more might and hope. But we need prayers fervently. We need to pray for those who are leaving the country as well as who are staying in the country. Some people are leaving the country because they feel hopeless. They think going outside the country, in quotation, they will be more safe, both economically and securely, but we are not sure of that. They will face other problems. So we have to pray for them to have the inner peace. Like in our case, we need prayers to continue our ministries in our churches. And we need to pray for our brothers and sisters in other countries, where in each country there is a church also suffering kind of from other problems. Of course, with prayers comes actions. We pray, we believe in the power of prayer, but we also believe that God shows us ways to help each other directly also. For example, let's say financial assistances we receive from partners, Christian brothers and sisters, that's a big help. The prayers we receive are a great help. Sometimes fraternal workers who come to our countries and work beside us is also a very great help. You know, the tendency for the people is to escape our countries, but then suddenly you see a missionary, a fraternal worker coming to your country in that situation, living the same conditions as you are, gives a boost both for the leadership and for the people. Seeing other Christians extending hand to us gives hope also. So in reality, we are one in a planet called Earth, where as Christians, as one body of Christ, we are partners, should be in fellowship, putting aside every theological or ecclesiastical differences, because we believe in one God and in one Lord, helping each other, continuing to be witnesses for even, of course, non-Christians around us where we are living, so that they can see the grace and the love of God.
Je remercie Sébouh et Salam pour ce qu'ils ont partagé avec nous. Je vous propose de passer un temps de questions-réponses avec eux. Donc, on peut faire circuler un micro. Vos questions seront traduites, quelle que soit la langue dans laquelle elles seront posées. Et si vous prenez la parole, il faudra bien tenir le micro comme nos invités l'ont fait jusque-là.
En Syrie, combien il y a d'églises évangéliques aujourd'hui, et quelle est la population?
The population of Syria, to start with, is around 22 million now. Maybe there are no formal statistics. The percentage of Christian would be around 5% all over Syria. It declined during the crisis. I give you an example of Aleppo. We know that there was a big Christian community in Aleppo of around 350,000. Now there are less than 50,000 left of the Christians. As for evangelical churches, there are mainly two types of evangelicals or Protestant churches. The mainline Protestant churches, represented through the Armenian evangelical churches and the Presbyterian Arab churches. And on the other hand, there are the evangelicals who re-baptize adults or baptize only adults, like the Nazarenes, the Baptists, and the Alliance, and etc. So two types of Christians. As for churches, there are many churches all over the country for Protestants of two types of Protestantism.
On pourrait poser la même question pour le Liban.
Même question pour le Liban.
Lebanon is known to have around 6 million Lebanese populated. And if we will count the refugees now, the Syrian refugees and the Palestinian, so we will reach around 8 million. The Christians are considered to be around, if I'm going to be optimistic, 40% of the population. And so the Christians are decreasing in number, and the evangelicals are the minority in the Christians. But as I said, we're not afraid of numbers. Our schools and our churches do a lot of Christian work in the communities we serve. So it's not in the numbers, but in the quality and the work we're doing as Christian minorities. And lots of Christians from other denominations, even Muslims, appreciate our academic schools, and they send their children to our schools. They benefit there, and of course our schools in our part of the world are free to teach Christian classes, Bible classes. We do chapels in the morning. So we at least thank God for our states that it is not forbidden, and we can still continue our mission as a church in the schools also. And some of our churches are fed by these students. They come to the Sunday schools, teenage, youth groups, and the church. So each church which has a school beside it feed the church also at the end, and the mission continues.
La question est peut-être un peu stupide, mais je voulais savoir si autant en Syrie qu'au Liban, il y a actuellement beaucoup de réfugiés palestiniens, chrétiens et musulmans. Et qu'est-ce qu'ils deviennent dans ces pays en ce moment? Voilà, les Palestiniens chrétiens et les Palestiniens musulmans. Voilà.
Of course, the Palestinian issue is much longer than we were born. However, this is the situation. We have special camps where the Palestinians live. And there is one camp for the Christian Palestinians. So even the Palestinian camps are divided according to their religion. You have several camps for non-Christians, like Muslims, and one camp for the Christian Palestinians. However, they are Palestinians. In principle, it was forbidden for them to work as refugees, and so they didn't get work permit. However, with time, they started going out of their camps and working in the community, kind of illegally, but they have to earn their own money also because they want to work. Now, I know that lots of Christian organizations work in these camps also, trying to help them in relief or socio-medical issues, both in the Christian and Muslim camps.
Yes, we do have Palestinian refugees who live also in camps. When we say camps, it doesn't mean tents. It means houses, but sometimes they are not well organized or not well served with sanitation and electricity and etc. And there are almost in every city in Syria, in Damascus, Homs, Aleppo, Latakia, there are certain areas where there is a camp for Palestinian refugees.
Oui, je vous remercie de la description que vous venez de nous faire du Liban actuellement. On sait que depuis les années 70, et même si on remonte un petit peu avant, vous traversez crise après crise, avec des nécessités de reconstruction, des nécessités de trouver des solutions pour héberger, pour accueillir et pour éduquer la population et la faire vivre. Aujourd'hui, la situation dans laquelle vous êtes est une situation qui semble catastrophique. Oui, la situation que vous vivez actuellement semble catastrophique. On peut imaginer... Pardon. Voilà, c'est bien. La situation dans laquelle vous êtes aujourd'hui, effectivement, paraît particulièrement catastrophique. On peut imaginer la difficulté de l'endroit où nous nous trouvons là, de vivre dans ces conditions-là, sans électricité, difficulté d'eau, d'approvisionnement, médicaments, nourriture, etc. Vivre ça au jour le jour, c'est quelque chose de particulièrement éprouvant. Alors, la question qui me vient à l'esprit, c'est que vous êtes une population résiliente, on le sait, puisque vous avez retrouvé à un certain moment un certain Beyrouth, en tout cas un certain art de vivre, une certaine joie de vivre, et puis de nouveau vous ressombrez dans les difficultés les plus profondes. Comment voyez-vous aujourd'hui l'issue d'un pays comme le Liban? Ça paraît particulièrement compliqué d'imaginer la manière dont vous allez pouvoir sortir de cette situation, à la fois sur le plan politique, économique, religieux. Là, les églises font un travail remarquable, vous l'avez dit, mais comment voyez-vous cette issue de cette situation d'aujourd'hui? Merci.
When the civil war started in Lebanon, I was almost 8 years old, and we had electricity shortage at that time too. I remember going to school and studying under candle light. I'm now 56 years old. I still read sometimes books under kind of battery lights. My generation and above, the resilience you talked about is true, as if they had trained us slowly to reach these past few years where it is really unbearable not to have water at your home, not to have electricity, so all other functions are stopping. Now I have a son, 19 years old. I think he's getting trained to be resilient too now. It is more difficult for them because this generation who woke up on the new technology, everything working with electricity and internet and social media, now failing to do so because of these things sometimes. So that's why most young people are trying to leave the country and go away. Solution? Well, we believe in miracles. However, there was a very slight change during the parliamentarian elections. So-called 13 deputy members were elected this year out of the 128, which were always the traditional parties winning. So these 13 independent deputies could be the start of a change, although we need time to evaluate their performance, because unfortunately elections are based on denominational representations in the country. So these independent people are in the parliament because of their denomination, whether they like it or not. That's the system, electoral system. It's not a fair electoral system. We don't like it, but this is what we have till now, until the parliament would vote for another system. So these 13, they were asked after they were elected, whether they will work closely with each other as independent group or not. Now, their answers sometimes were political, saying on certain issues we will work together, on certain things we will adhere to our denomination or kind of to the parties which are represented by their denomination. So we are waiting, and we will see the outcome of this, hoping as they promised, they will work for the country and not for their own personal gain or for their personal or friendship parties that they might belong or their family members might belong to. And if they succeed, I hope during the next election, the 13 would be 30 and the wheel of change might start. Now, this is internally, however. Of course, nothing in small countries are being decided on their own. I'm sure external forces, external nations, external countries which are interested in Lebanon or the wealth of Lebanon will have a say in this. So it's very easy to see at a certain stage a glimpse of hope, and then corruption might also get into them and they would just be as the rest of the team.
Salam, est-ce que vous souhaitez aussi réagir à cette question de l'issue que vous pouvez entrevoir à la situation que connaît la Syrie aujourd'hui?
Well, first world countries did not come to what they live now at a sudden or at one point in history. They, for example, to talk about Europe, there was the Renaissance, then the Protestant Reformation, then the Enlightenment, then the Industrial Revolution, and etc. So the wheel of change does not create a society or a community that is mature with the right values of a modern state just in 1 year or 2 years. There's a journey they have to walk, and I think there should be a revolution in the minds and in the thoughts of the people where they can be convinced of certain values that are needed to form a modern state, a state of institutions, a state of justice, a state of equality, a state of constitution for the law, and that what make a state a modern state and a progressive state. So the journey might be long, but we have to go through all the phases in order to reach the right or the level of stability where we will have a state where everyone will be respected, have the rights, and have a life of dignity on all levels.
Je propose de prendre une dernière question dans la salle. S'il y a, oui.
Vous nous avez beaucoup parlé de l'importance des liens entre vos églises et nos églises ici en France, à la fois en termes de prière, d'action et de connaissances mutuelles. Personnellement, je suis assez convaincue que ces liens prennent une toute autre nature quand on met des visages et des noms sur les églises, les communautés avec lesquelles on est en lien. Voilà, de manière tout à fait personnelle, j'ai vécu très différemment l'explosion du port de Beyrouth qu'un tas d'autres événements dans le monde tout aussi dramatiques, parce que j'avais des amis là-bas et que je ne savais pas où ils étaient, comment ils vivaient ce moment-là. Et je suis convaincue aussi qu'on a beaucoup à s'apprendre et à apprendre les uns des autres dans ces relations qui sont mises en place. Et je me demandais concrètement, entre vos églises au Liban, en Syrie, mais aussi dans la salle en Iran, et notre église protestante unie ou l'UEPAL, qu'est-ce qui est mis en place par l'Action chrétienne en Orient ou par d'autres pour favoriser ces contacts, non pas d'association à association ou d'institution à institution, mais de membres de nos communautés? Est-ce qu'il y a des projets qui existent en ce sens?
Alors, est-ce que c'est une question pour un de nos invités ou plutôt pour Mathieu Bouche? Je vous laisse décider qui répond.
C'est évident, chère Marion, que se rencontrer change tout, quoi. Quand on vit des vraies relations face-to-face, pardon, à visage humain, tu l'as vécu avec des camps de jeunes, un échange de jeunes. Donc on continue à faire des échanges de jeunes entre membres partenaires de l'ACO. On a le projet de faire un camp de jeunes du Centenaire qui réunirait non pas cette fois-ci des jeunes de deux partenaires, un oriental, un occidental, mais plutôt des 6. Avec un peu de chance, l'été prochain ou dans 2 ans, on devrait y arriver et de réunir comme ça une trentaine de jeunes quelque part. On a aussi toujours cet échange et on y tient beaucoup entre de paroissiens et de gens qui viennent vraiment du terrain et qui découvrent une autre église partenaire. Et donc toujours aussi dans le sens Orient-Occident. Donc avant les célébrations de notre centenaire, par exemple, on était dans 2 personnes qui sont ici présentes, Ouri et Taline, qui viennent du Liban et de Syrie, qui appartiennent à l'Union des Églises évangéliques arméniennes du Proche Orient, ont eu l'occasion de découvrir l'UEPAL, l'Alsace, nos églises, nos réalités, nos joies, nos difficultés pendant une semaine. Et c'était le voyage retour de 2 membres de l'UEPAL qui étaient partis avant la pandémie en 2019 découvrir l'Union des Églises évangéliques arméniennes au Liban et en Syrie. Et alors c'est petit parce que évidemment on aimerait emmener beaucoup plus de gens. On rêve, tout ça, mais ça prend du temps. C'est compliqué, ça demande de l'argent, de l'investissement. Mais c'est une dimension, en tout cas, de l'ACO qu'on ne veut absolument pas abandonner. Évidemment, il y a tellement de besoins humanitaires qu'on pourrait mettre tout l'argent là-dedans, mais on croit vraiment beaucoup à ces relations humaines et fraternelles et où l'échange se vit de manière forte. Et, dans une prière où on peut aussi être assis ensemble sur un même banc d'église, c'est quelque chose qui fait partie de notre identité, de notre histoire et qu'on ne lâchera pas. C'est modeste, mais c'est vital, j'ai envie de dire.
Sébouh ou Salam, vous voulez ajouter quelque chose? Ou est-ce que Mathieu a répondu à la question?
Thank you, Marion, for your question. It is very important. You have felt that these exchanges, what difference has made in your life, and we see the friendship for past, I don't know, 20 years or more, I don't know. I know you know the rest of the team, and I'm glad you are in contact with each other. Sometimes these projects work, sometimes it doesn't. In your case, it has worked, and there is this intimacy and keeping in touch with each other always. Sometimes people are back into their normal business and life, and they forget to get in touch. This is important on short exchange levels. However, as I said in one of my answers, long-term fraternal workers are also important. Usually it's a one direction, usually from the west to the east. Maybe also the language is a barrier, but this is also very important because it not just gives physical presence and help in, for example, nursing projects, social work projects, psychological projects, having counselors in our midst. But even sometimes we get, the outcome would be a new family between East and West, and we have among us people coming into the East, and now it's a family which is a tie between West and East. So that's also a possibility, and this enriches the fellowship and the communication with each other. And the very, very important thing is, when these exchanges happen, each person getting involved should go back to the church and talk about it and discuss about it several times, not a one-time thing, to keep the churches informed about each other. So thank you.
We are living in a world where connection and communication is quite high. We know about anything at any time in a second through internet. So connection between partners all over the world, between East and West, is very important, and we have to know that the world is almost a small village where we can share thoughts and stand together at any time. For example, the churches in the West are helping the churches in the East as they go into suffering, and maybe the churches in the East can help the churches in the West in understanding certain issues about immigration, about Islam, about radical Islam, etc. So we need each other, and we can have mutual work together, because the world is almost becoming very, very small through connection.
Juste pour conclure, j'aimerais vous poser encore cette question, et je serai obligée de vous demander de répondre brièvement pour qu'on essaye de quand même tenir à peu près les horaires. Qu'est-ce qui vous fait rester là où vous êtes aujourd'hui? On a parlé de ceux qui partent et ils ont des raisons d'aspirer à autre chose. Qu'est-ce qui vous fait rester là où vous êtes aujourd'hui?
I shared this with my brothers and sisters before. It is very tempting, especially if you're invited from so-called a more secure country to serve in that country and to take your family with you and leave behind all the troubles you were living in. I myself believe that God calls each one of His servants differently. Everyone gets a calling. I can talk about myself and probably some of the colleagues with whom I have talked. In my case, I believe I was born in Lebanon for a mission, for probably these times or worse times and better times. During my life, I have felt the presence of God differently. In 1975, my house was bombed during the First War. A whole wall disappeared because of the bomb, and I was sleeping underneath. It seems I had lost consciousness because I woke up in the arms of my father taking me to hospital. I was only injured one place at my knee and nothing else. The next day in the morning, the Jews living in my building at that time, they were still there. The Muslims in the neighborhood and the Kurds and the Christians, they visited our apartment as a touristic site to see what had happened with the bomb. Literally, the room was ruined except the place where I had slept. You know, in the movies, they draw a line when someone dies, you know, with chalk. It was literally the same. All of my bed and the cottons were hit by shells, iron shells, and only my place had remained. Now, at that time, I was very small, and there were pictures on the wall that did not exist. They were thrown away, except the cross on my bed. The Muslims and all said this is a miracle. One thing after the other, I saw when I looked back, God was in control of my life, protecting me. At other times I was kidnapped. Other times, almost a sniper hit. I survived in all of this. Now, you might ask, you survived, others did not. I don't know. God had a reason in my life to give me life to serve. So I feel I'm born in Lebanon because of a mission. Actually, after school, I started to go and to the university as an engineering student. And then the 2-year war started and the university was closed and I couldn't attend, and I was working a volunteer social worker in our church, distributing water to those elderly who couldn't carry 20 liters of water up to their apartments. And at that time, another calling was received to serve full-time our Lord. So all this I'm telling of my experience. I don't know others, but I feel I'm there for a ministry. As for my family, I'm not sure what my son will decide. He might leave the country, he might not. God will work through him also, maybe. He may whisper in his ears also, that's possible. But I know I'm in Lebanon for the time being, at least until I hear another whisper.
Well, my perspective is quite different from this, because I feel we are committed to a cause, not to a geography. And maybe sometimes we follow the cause and follow the call. And I respect what Brother Sébouh said about his commitment to the ministry. And this is our commitment too. But we read in the Bible that, for example, the sons of Jacob went to Egypt because there was hunger in the land of Palestine, and then they went out, the tribes went out from Egypt toward Palestine, fleeing the slavery. So movement is sometimes the nature of humanity. People keep moving and keep changing places, not because they hate the land, but because sometimes they are obliged to do so. We read in the Bible, also in the book of Acts, that the Christians, after a certain persecution, were scattered to different places, but they did not lose the word of God. They kept proclaiming the word of God to everywhere they were found. Even Paul, the apostle, he was refused. In the book of Acts, it says that he was refused, and by that incident, he took a decision to go to the Gentiles at the time, and that's how ministry opened toward Europe, where he went to Galatia, Ephesus, Rome, Spain, different places. God can use us wherever we go. We should stick to the cause. And this is our cause now, and we are committed to it.
Je vais remercier nos deux invités, Sébouh Terzian, Salam Hanna. Merci d'avoir été avec nous, de partager votre témoignage. Je vous remercie aussi à vous le public d'avoir été présente, d'avoir participé. Avant qu'on se quitte, une petite information pratique. Pour ceux qui ont bénéficié de la traduction, il y a un casque, un petit boîtier qui va avec. S'il vous plaît, remettez-le peut-être à la personne qui est tout à fait à la sortie. Voilà, c'est très important pour nous de récupérer ce matériel, comme vous pouvez l'imaginer. Et enfin, voilà, j'encourage ceux qui le souhaitent à éventuellement se connecter et faire un don en ligne, que ce soit à l'Action chrétienne en Orient ou à l'Oratoire du Louvre qui nous accueille aussi ce soir. Voilà, c'est une possibilité. Merci à tous, bonne soirée.